Queen Barenziah is arguably one of the most iconic names of the Third Era on Tamriel. She was the first queen of Morrowind and friend of the Emperor. Her first husband was Symmachus, a general of Emperor Tiber Septim at the time, and even the Emperor himself was likely one of her lovers as well. Symmachus and Barenziah were told to be beloved and popular among the citizens of Morrowind. Queen Barenziah was a loyal beneficiary of the Third Era. She had sided against Uriel Septim III and Queen Potema amid the War of the Red Diamond in the Third Era 120. She and King Eadwyr in the Third Era 417 were among a list of political leaders who held interests in the Totem of Tiber Septim, and was one such who greatly benefited from the warp in the west. Barenziah claims she doesn't know what happened during the mystical two-day anomaly. Many years later, she had returned to Morrowind. Her son Helseth had become king, and her daughter Morgaya had become the first queen of Firsthold. Barenziah may or may not have had other children, only one of the many controversial topics of her life.
Barenziah was born in the year 893 of the Second Era, the daughter of the Lord and Lady of Mournhold, and was a member of the House Ra'atim, a now defunct Dunmeri Great House. There are two strongly contrasting accounts that document her life. The Biography of Queen Barenziah, which is a public and accredited version of her life as written by imperial scribes, which is clearly imperially biased. We discussed that book and that part of her life and that vision of her life on my channel. And on this channel we will discuss the Real Barenziah, which focuses heavily on the so-called real events of the story, supposedly confirmed by Barenziah herself in confidential conversations between her and a trusted friend. Many versions of Barenziah's life have been published, and a censored copy was later in circulation. Centuries later, in the Fourth Era, another reiteration had been made public, the Nightingales, which had given yet another adaptation of her life and story, and implicated that Barenziah had hidden many details of the story to avoid political controversy.
The Real Barenziah, for the most part, follows the same encompassing story that the official biography follows. However, it goes into much more detail, and often has some contradicting pieces that conflict with the regular biography. Sometime after her parents had left Mournhold to war against Tiber Septim, the young princess Barenziah was taken away from the palace by her nurse. Barenziah states, all she could remember from that time was seeing a huge shadow with burning eyes filling the sky. After many days, Barenziah had been in the care of multiple strangers and soldiers, and her nurse had mysteriously vanished. She eventually found herself in the care of a reluctant count of Darkmoor in Skyrim. Monthly, a courier would show up with a small bag of gold, and a bag of her favorite treat, dried mushrooms, and would also visit to check on Barenziah's well-being.
Barenziah upheld her facade in her youth, and she spent a lot of her youth pilfering, lying, and using a little bit of misplaced magic. As she aged, she discovered a lifestyle of sexual activity as well, and also realized that she had never been quite comfortable with the Count and Countess who helped raise her, and she quickly began to hate them as time moved forward. The Countess, Inga, also had certain animosities toward Barenziah because of her race. However, Straw, a farm boy and Barenziah's latest boyfriend of sorts, had convinced Barenziah to run away with him and escape this life. And Barenziah was quickly convinced as she realized that the couriers who visited monthly had given the impression that she was becoming ready for whatever was planned for her life. And Barenziah did not really trust the incentive behind this, so she commenced with escaping with Straw and traveled eastbound.
Barenziah and Straw snuck into Whiterun, and she had spent a full week robbing homes before her and Straw eventually left, headed towards Riften. It was at this time that Barenziah took part in multiple sexual encounters along the way, and once they arrived in Riften, Barenziah searched for a Khajiit thief named Theris to join the Thieves Guild. In return for sexual favors, Theris granted her entry into the Thieves Guild. Eventually, Barenziah was burglarizing the Imperial Commandment's house. General Symmachus, who is thought to have actually baited her into robbing the place, encountered her in his home and had revealed the truth and severity of her title and the circumstances at hand. He promised her that Theris nor Straw would be harmed. However, this was a lie. After everything had transpired, Theris was executed and Straw's tongue was cut out of him. Symmachus deceived her with this story, and it is the version in which Barenziah had enumerated to Tiber Septim upon meeting him after being taken to the Imperial City.
Tiber Septim was enamored by Barenziah's beauty. After Symmachus had departed from Morrowind, she had an apparent affair with the Emperor, and it did not take long before Barenziah and Tiber Septim became lovers. However, after Tiber discovered that she was pregnant, he became furious, and to avoid any scandal or controversy, he ordered an abortion to be carried out on her, against Barenziah's will. Barenziah had left from Mournhold earlier than she had liked. Many in the Imperial City were saddened by her leave, but others were not. But despite these events, Barenziah and Tiber Septim upheld close political ties.
After Tiber Septim's death in the Third Era 38, Symmachus had proposed to Barenziah, and she had quickly accepted. Their marriage was proven to be quite profitable in many ways. The new emperor held great trust in Symmachus, and Barenziah was quite popular and beloved among the citizens of Morrowind. Barenziah greatly trusted Symmachus, and their love for each other flourished for many years to come. Symmachus was told to have sought her since her birth, and he was only a mere prospector at the time.
Around the year 376 of the Third Era, Barenziah was charmed and deceived by a bard named Nightingale, who used her position as queen to gain forbidden entry into the mines underneath Mournhold. In the mines at an ancestral shrine was a powerful relic called the Staff of Chaos. Nightingale then successfully robbed the mines of this artifact, and Symmachus had arrived to stop him, but was too late, as the Nightingale teleported out when he arrived. Symmachus concealed the fact that Barenziah had caused this, and eventually forgave her for her recklessness. Symmachus has sent an urgent message to the Emperor Uriel Septim VII for aid, but he was instead told to seek help from the Imperial battle mage, Jaeger Tharn. However, Symmachus was hesitant to proceed with this advice, because he believed that it was Tharn himself who was behind the sacking of the Staff of Chaos.
News had suddenly came up telling of Jaeger Tharn and Ria Solmain's death, and that the Emperor had abruptly raised taxes. The unhappy citizens of Morrowind rebelled against this, and Symmachus attempted his very best to minimize the conflict. This is when he sent Barenziah and their 2 children to the Imperial City to seek counsel with the Emperor. It was not long after Barenziah had departed for the Imperial City that Symmachus was murdered when the Royal Guard abandoned him and joined in on the revolt. In the Third Era 391, Barenziah had counseled with the Emperor and recognized this Emperor as the impostor Jaeger Tharn. She kept this secret but gained no advice from him because of this. Barenziah did know that Tharn had broken the Staff of Chaos into 8 pieces and had hidden them in several obscure and hidden locations. She had utilized Tharn's diary after seducing him and figured out where these missing pieces had been planted. After she found out the last location of the last piece, her and her children fled to Morrowind with King Eadweir. Tharn did nothing to halt their escape, as to not let his disguise become apparent, and to avoid public scandal. On her return to Mournhold, she was shocked to find Symmachus killed, but had little time to mourn her late husband's death because of the urgency that was at hand.
After Barenziah returned to Mournhold and held a meeting with King Eadweir, Nightingale returned to her, revealing himself from his disguise and confessing his love for her. She reprocreated, but only to avenge Symmachus. She eventually fled to Wayrest with Eadweir many months later. By this time she was 6 months pregnant and eventually had a son, which is one last contradiction to the official biography, because she didn't end up marrying Eadweir after until only a year had passed. Barenziah had become Queen of Wayrest, and Eadweir had adopted her 2 children, Helset and Mogria.
Many years had passed, and in the Fourth Era 201, a new version of Barenziah's story had come forth, specifically encompassing the events involving the extortion of the Staff of Chaos. As written in the Nightingales, Volume 2, What We Were, the bard who beguiled Barenziah was in fact a representative of the Nightingale Trinity, a trio of expert thieves who were blessed by Nocturnal herself. The bard understood under the pseudonym Nightingale was actually a Dunmer named Draven Indoril, who had been employed by Jaeger Tharn to attain the staff. Jaeger attempted to murder Draven, but his ability as a Nightingale granted his escape. Tharn had sent his agents in pursuit of him, but had eventually given up.
The books from the Fourth Era state that Barenziah twisted the truth in her words in the Real Barenziah to avoid political discrepancies and guilt. as during her time with Draven she gave birth to a daughter whom she deserted and gave to an assistant in order to protect her side of the story, and to conceal her affair, and to avoid political controversy. The child, who would later become known as Drolsey, went to become one of the Nightingales, much like her father, after she found him based in Skyrim. Drolsey settled in Skyrim and had become quite talented and successful as a thief, as would Drolsey's daughter, Carlia.
After the events of the Imperial Simulacrum, Barenziah played an important role in the political affairs of the region surrounding the Iliac Bay. She had put an immense amount of force into attempting to conceal the Real Barenziah from public view, and according to Barenziah herself, the Real Barenziah was a cruel and defamatory book that was written by an unhappy and demented scribe. The book was successfully abolished, and the author had been executed, but its chapters have come out multiple times since then. The book was a threat to her political position as queen, mostly surrounding its pieces about her love with Tiber Septim. Gortua Gro Nagorm of Orsinium had greatly sought out this book in order to publish it, as well as Manamarco for blackmailing purposes. Afraid to create major conflict in the Wayrest court, Barenziah requested for Uriel Septim VII's agent to fetch the biography. In return, she offered them information on the totem of Tiber Septim. The scandalous book was finally Barenziah's again, and the agent got the information for the Emperor. Eventually, an edited and revised version was passed around. The sexually explicit minutiae was taken out and censored, possibly by the command of the Tribunal Temple.
Around the year 427 of the Third Era, a scribe and close friend to Barenziah confidentially confessed to her being the true and anonymous author of the Real Barenziah, the unofficial biography. He had gone by the pseudonym Platinius Maro and stated that he had written the book after an intense amount of research when he was still young. He was saved from a beheading by Barenziah herself. He believed that it was because she knew the story was true, and eventually she was amused by this version. She secured him from the punishment that the imperial family had for him, making the rumor that he was killed by her guards. But this was not true, as she stationed him with her.
Many years after the events of the Warp in the West, and after Eadweir's death, Barenziah had returned to Morrowind, likely to retire to her countryside estates. Morrowind welcomed her with open arms, and she was told to be beloved by the people of her homeland. Her son, Helseth, returned to her side. The events that occurred in Wayrest and how they occurred is not exactly clear, but it is known that there was a competition for power between Eadweir's daughter from a marriage of prior origin, Princess Elisana, and Barenziah's own son, Helseth. Princess Elisana had won this competition for power, and after this, Barenziah and Helseth had left Wayrest together, but by this time Barenziah's daughter Morgaya had already been queen of Firsthold. While it is believed a setback or defeat for them, many imperial scholars believe that the conclusion of the event was a symbol of Elisana's intelligence and craftiness, rather than deficiency on Helseth's or Barenziah's end. After Barenziah returned to Morrowind, her uncle Lathan had passed away under strange circumstances, and Helseth had become king of Morrowind. When Barenziah retired, she withdrew herself from politics, or at least displayed herself as such. However, she did retain a great interest and concern about the inclination of opposition among the monarchy and the temple. Although it was never officially stated or confirmed, it is inquired by many citizens who were loyal to Lathan, claimed he died of poisoning by Helseth.
Multiple sources hint to Barenziah's proficient handling of indoctrination and spies. The Real Barenziah mentioned multiple incidents in which she had distorted the truth to save herself. Although it was usually Symmachus who was creating the cover-up stories, not really Barenziah usually. The Nightingales, even though they hold her culpable for telling lies, claim that the book The Real Barenziah is still encased in lies either way. The book, titled A Game at Dinner, tells a tale of Barenziah's time after she had departed back to Morrowind, and portrays Helseth as a callous and malevolent king, enveloped by treachery. The truth of this story isn't known, but the author does note that Barenziah and her son authorized the publishing and printing of this book in shops across Morrowind, despite the portrayal.
Despite Barenziah claiming she was a retired queen mother in her latter years in the Third Era, it is greatly circulated that she continued to hold significant authority. The Dunmeri Count Andal Indaris of Shadenal and Cyrodiil was believed to have achieved his title through use of Barenziah's leverage. Even her own son, King Helseth, was often ridiculed in being much more insignificant compared to Barenziah.
When Helseth caught wind of the Nerevarines' arrival, he deployed assassins to dispose of them, as he viewed them as a potential threat to his leadership. This guided the Nerevarine to Mournhold, and Helseth claimed that it was all a misunderstanding. However, Helseth sent the Nerevarine on many quests, often dangerous, in that the Nerevarine had to greatly risk their life in order to complete said quests. This climaxed when the Nerevarine was requested by Helseth to wait at the royal castle and single-handedly counter the plot to assassinate Queen Barenziah. Barenziah did not show much concern that the Nerevarine was the only thing protecting her, as she was quite confused by why anyone would choose to assassinate her at this time, since she had grown old, retired, and without any governmental power that she once had. After following King Helseth's instructions, the Nerevarine had become trapped with assassins, surmounted by the sheer number of them. It isn't quite known who was the exact target of these assassins, if it was Queen Barenziah, or if it was the Nerevarine himself. And if Barenziah was in on this plot or what information she might have known about it is also unknown. After a bit of convincing, Helseth managed to get the Nerevarine on his side to contend yet another menace, the mad goddess Almalexia. It was during this time that Barenziah normally met with the Nerevarine and offered him her elderly yet wise assistance.
After the Nerevarine had set sail for Akavir, after the hero of Cyrodiil had ended the Oblivion Crisis, and after the eruption of Red Mountain, all word and mention of Barenziah had now ceased. It is not known if Barenziah had passed peacefully from old age during the events of the Oblivion Crisis, during the catastrophic events of Red Mountain, or during the invasion of Morrowind by the Argonians, or if Barenziah had died at all and yet lives. Mentions of her progeny had also ceased after the beginning of the Fourth Era, and it is told that her palace remains completely empty and unoccupied for many years as of the Fourth Era 201.
Thank you guys for watching this very uncensored biography of Barenziah that we presented to you in this video. If you want to see which version of the story the Imperial government wants you to know and which version they present to the people of the Empire, consider watching my video on my channel, which I do together with Lady of Scrolls as well, where we present a completely censored version of her life, and you'll manage to see that the Imperial government isn't really too keen on disclosing many of the more controversial details about her life. I would say give that a watch, the link is probably in the description.